You know those everyday sounds of city life? The traffic, the planes flying overhead, the construction. We all kind of learn to tune them out. We might think it's just annoying, but what if I told you it's doing a lot more than just getting on our nerves? What if it's silently, seriously damaging our health?
Okay, let's just jump right in with a number that's going to blow your mind. 1.3 million. That is the number of healthy life years that are lost every single year in Europe just from traffic noise. We're not talking about an inconvenience here. This is a massive, and honestly, a deeply overlooked public health crisis.
And this chart is where it really hits home. Look, we all know about the risks of things like secondhand smoke, right? But check this out. According to this data, the health burden from noise is actually greater. It's a threat that's right up there with some of the most serious environmental dangers we know about. So, all of this has forced a huge shift in thinking. For the longest time, noise was just seen as, a nuisance, something you just have to put up with. But the evidence is just too overwhelming now. Scientists and health organizations have officially reclassified transportation noise. It is no longer just an annoyance, it's a major cardiovascular risk factor. And the sheer scale of this is, well, it's staggering. We're talking more than 113 million people in Europe who are living day in and day out with noise levels that are scientifically proven to be bad for them. It's this constant invisible stressor that a huge chunk of the population just can't get away from. So how? How does the sound actually cause physical harm? Let's get into it. So here's the really wild part. The damage doesn't start in your ears. Nope. It starts deep inside your brain. Even when you're totally passed out, fast asleep, your brain is still on duty, constantly scanning your surroundings for any potential threats. This diagram basically shows us your grain on noise. A sudden sound, like a plane roaring overhead, triggers this ancient alarm system. Areas like the amygdala, which is kind of like your brain's emotional threat detector, just light up like a Christmas tree. It screams to the rest of your body, "Hey, something's wrong, prepare for danger." And that kicks off this whole chain reaction. The brain perceives a threat, the amygdala sounds the alarm, and then bam! Your body gets flooded with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It is the classic fight-or-flight response. But instead of being triggered by, a tiger, it's being triggered over and over and over again by traffic. And there's actually a name for this whole process. Scientists call it the noise reaction model. It's the core theory that connects the simple act of hearing a sound to this complex and pretty damaging stress reaction that ripples through your entire body. Okay, so the brain triggers this stress response. But how does that stress actually hurt your heart and your blood vessels? Let's follow the chain of command, from those hormones down to real physical harm. Being in this constant state of high alert, it's just brutal on your body at a cellular level. It causes something called endothelial dysfunction, which is basically damage to the super delicate lining of your arteries. It triggers inflammation in your blood vessels. It promotes oxidative stress. You can think of that as a kind of rust on your cells. And it totally throws off your body's internal clock, your circadian rhythm. I love this analogy. Think of the inside of your arteries like a perfectly smooth, non-stick pan. Everything flows easily. But that noise-induced stress is like taking sandpaper to that surface, scratching it all up and making it rough and sticky. That's endothelial dysfunction. And that rough surface is the perfect place for plaque to grab on and build up, which is exactly what leads to heart attacks and strokes. And if that wasn't enough, the damage goes even deeper, down to your very genes. This illustration shows how that chronic stress can actually cause what are called epigenetic changes. Now, in simple terms, that means noise pollution can literally flip switches on your DNA, turning on genes that promote inflammation. It's basically reprogramming your body for a state of chronic disease. So we've gone from the brain all the way down to the cellular level. But what does this look like in the real world, for actual people? Well, the toll on our health is widespread, and frankly, it's devastating. Now, a chart like this might look a little intimidating, but the takeaway is incredibly simple and powerful. It's called a forest plot, and it combines the results from a ton of different studies. All you need to see is that almost all of those little squares are on the right side of that center line. That is rock-solid evidence that study after study, in different places with different people, all point to the same conclusion. Traffic noise is linked to heart disease. And we can actually put some hard numbers on that risk. For every 10 decibel increase in traffic noise, and that's roughly the difference between a quiet library and a normal conversation,
your risk of ischemic heart disease jumps by 4 to 8%. Your stroke risk goes up 5%, and your risk for heart failure goes up 4%. It's simple. The louder our world gets, the sicker we get. So our hearts are clearly in the firing line. But the story doesn't stop there. Researchers started asking a really important question. If this kind of noise can harm the bodies of adults, what on earth might it be doing to the developing minds of children? Well, a really fascinating study out of Korea gave us a pretty startling answer. They looked at elementary school students living near a loud military airfield and compared them to a control group. The results, as you can see right here, are just wow. The kids in the high noise group scored on average over 3 points lower on tests of their reasoning ability. So let's be clear about what this means. Chronic aircraft noise isn't just a distraction in the classroom. It is directly linked to a measurable drop in a key cognitive skill, reasoning, which is absolutely fundamental for learning and for solving problems. This suggests that noise pollution could literally be putting some kids at a permanent educational disadvantage. When you put all of this evidence together, from heart attacks in adults to impaired learning in children, it forces us to completely rethink the world we live in. Noise isn't just a side effect of modern life. It's a critical environmental pollutant, and it demands our attention. And here is where it gets even more complicated. Because noise rarely acts alone. In our cities, the same roads, the same flight paths that are generating all this noise, they're also pumping out another invisible threat: air pollution. This double trouble diagram illustrates it perfectly. You've got noise stressing out the brain and the nervous system, while at the same time, air pollution is directly attacking the lungs and cardiovascular system. And when they happen together, their effects don't just add up, they can actually amplify each other. It creates a combined assault on our bodies, a perfect storm of environmental toxins. At this point, the scientific consensus is crystal clear. You don't have to take my word for it. This quote from the research says it all. Transportation noise isn't a potential risk or a suspected factor. It is an established, proven cardiovascular risk factor, and it needs to be taken just as seriously as things like high cholesterol. So all of this leaves us with a final, pretty unsettling question to think about. All those sounds we've learned to ignore, the humming traffic, the distant construction, the planes overhead, are they really just background noise? Or is the very sound of our modern world making us sick?